Okay, we're starting the recording now. We're going to share screen. Who's on here with me? Anybody? Okay. Okay, it's 5:30. I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is our final class live. I might have one or two join me here, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for either joining me in a minute, if you do indeed join me in a minute, or thanks for tuning into the recording if you're watching this on the recording. So it is our final week of the class. It's Tuesday evening at 5:30 on the East Coast here, where I am in South Florida, where it's warmed up to the 70s, I think, and much more agreeable weather to me. And I hope that wherever you are, that you're nice and warm and safe and dry and everything like that as we plunge into the last week of our course here, a little bit less than a week now. So it's been a fantastic course. You have all done a fantastic job. I'm very impressed with so many things that you have posted. We've had a great chance in this class to integrate theory and application, which is one of the driving forces in education, especially adult education, and for you. So I've been very pleased that you've been willing to share your experiences as they relate to the theories of adult and human development, even child development for that matter. And as you reflect on where you are at in your different stages, as well as in some cases where your parents are, or in some cases where your children are. In fact, some of you have even had to sort of project and guess how it will be for you when you get there, because you're not there yet to midlife or older, things like that. So anyway, it's been fantastic. So this is the final, again, final week and the final presentation, the final class live. And as such, as we started out with birth, even before birth, which I think is good to know, but not where we want to spend a lot of our time unless you're going to go into medical school after this. And most people aren't. They're just by definition, most people don't go into medical school. But we started out with the zygotes and the genes and all those kind of things, conception. And so not to say that they're unimportant, they are important, but the majority of our time has been spent on what we can actually apply to our lives as we move forward. And now, having said that, here we are in the final stages here. So we're going to talk about death and dying, which is the ultimate stage, the final stage of everyone's life, unless, of course, if Christ comes to take us home, which is the belief of most Christians, that at some point Jesus is going to come back to this earth and stop all the suffering, in which case there would be no more death, correct? So there's various ideas on that depending on what your religious persuasion is, but most in this course, I believe, are Christian, and something along those lines. So that hasn't happened yet. I personally have faith that it will happen, but until then, we are all going to have to face this final stage of life. So I want to just back up a couple of screens here. I won't take too much of your time, as I know you're wrapping up some of your assignments. So we're going to try and understand it a little bit. So one of the things that that we want to get into is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her theory and her ideas and her presentation on what it's like when we lose someone or when we're facing certain death ourselves. So, the slide here points out that actual death is a matter based on state guidelines. When you look at the legal terms and you think, well, we know when somebody's dead, and in most cases we do, but not in every case. Here in Florida, we had a case probably a dozen years or so, maybe 15 years ago, where a woman was left in a vegetative state. There, according to the neurologists and the heart doctors and every doctor that would come and see her, so there was zero chance that she would ever come out of this vegetative state, this coma. She would never have any quality of life. Now, having said that, there would be those who would proclaim that at some point with medical technology, they may bring her out, or at some point, God may touch her and bring her out of that. And that's those positions deserve a seat at the table, as I like to say when we're having a discussion. But she had been like this for quite some time, and what happened was her husband was adamant that this is not what she wanted, would not want, and did not want, and he wanted to turn off life support and let nature take its course. Her parents did not agree with that, and it became a. You may have seen it. I don't know if you remember or not, but it was a national news story. It went on for several weeks. Well, I'll tell you, the governor in Florida at the time was Jeb Bush. So that was before Rick Scott, who we have now, and Rick Scott's been in office about 10 years, I guess, something like that. So anyway, that's when it was going on. So anyway, so it does become a legal, there is a legal consideration, I should say. So, and a lot of times, it could be a consideration for a murder case or something along those lines. So I won't belabor that point any further, though. And when someone is dying, someone's been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and it's become very evident. There are stages. These are also the stages of grieving that were proposed by Elisabeth Kubler-Ross many, many years ago. And originally she had 4, and they were denial, anger, bargaining, and then acceptance. They have been revised a little bit, and you can see on the screen now that it's denial, anger, bargaining. Those have remained the same. Depression, and then final acceptance. These are not set in stone. I think the presentation and the textbook that you have does a good job, but I'm going to add a little bit to it here. Elisabeth Kubler-Ross essentially came up originally with these stages, and they were thought to be linear. In other words, first there was denial, and then there was anger, and then there was bargaining, and then there was acceptance. So you first, you go to the doctor, for example, and the doctor says, okay, look, we've found, you have an illness here, and you're only going to, you have at most 6 months to live. Well, first you're thinking, well, that must be a mistake. They must have got the records confused, or that doctor, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a quack. So that's the denial part. Then there is the anger part, like when it really kind of sounds like that's not fair. Like, that's I have so much more to do. That's not okay. I'm so mad. Like, why me? Why me, God? Or why? The anger could be directed at your family, or it could be directed at God, or it could be directed at doctors and you say they didn't give you good care, or they should have caught this earlier. The anger could be directed toward yourself. For example, why didn't I live a healthier lifestyle, or why didn't I go to the doctor sooner, or why did I smoke, or why did I drink? So then after you go through that stage, you get into bargaining. Oh, maybe if I start living a healthy lifestyle right now, or maybe if I stop drinking, or maybe if I pray real hard, or maybe if I start doing a lot of charity work, and you start bargaining, and you say, God, please, anything but this. And in your prayers, you bargain. And then finally be, what, I guess it's me. I guess it's going to happen. What we have found since studying these stages is that those 4 stages are very real, but you can ebb and flow. They're not linear. It's not, one doesn't lead to the next, to the next, to the next. Like, you may be in denial at first and say, that can't be right. That record's got to be wrong. And then be angry. And then go back to denial. You know what? I shouldn't be so angry because that's probably the wrong. I'm probably worrying for nothing. And you go back in denial. And then maybe you're going to skip over into bargaining. You don't typically skip too much, but you might spend a brief time in anger and then go to bargaining. Like, you know what? I'm going to go get a second opinion. That in a sense, that's bargaining. I'm going to, stop smoking. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to start eating only vegetables. I'm going to do all the right things. And then you can accept something and then say, you know what, and then go back from acceptance. That's why I think the PowerPoint here is, um, you know, it takes the effort to put final acceptance. I think it's interesting, and we're talking about human development here. But I spoke recently. I was invited to speak at a conference, and I was blessed to be asked to speak at this conference. For it was there were families there who had a child, a boy, because it's only boys who get Duchenne's. It's a muscular dystrophy, one of the you know worst kinds is Duchenne's. It's life-threatening, and they've come a long way with it, and life expectancy has increased even in the last 15 years with the research that's being done. But they also go through this denial because they get the news that their child has Duchenne's, and in most cases, people say, what is that? They don't know enough about it. I happen to know because I was invited to speak, and I have a very dear friend and colleague, but the family's more of a friend now, that their son was diagnosed with Duchenne's 10 years ago. And that's who invited me to speak at this conference, and I was, again, blessed. But they also go through the stages. They know that it's a terminal disease, and they're angry. And, but again, first you're in denial, like, that can't be right. That must be a misdiagnosis. And then you're angry, and like, how can this happen to my child? He's innocent. I don't understand this at all. And then you go into bargaining, like, okay, I'm going to work real hard, and I'm going to exercise with him, and I'm going to do all the right things. I'm going to get him the right medication. I'm going to do my own research because there's, a lot out there that the doctor may not know about. And so anyway, and then you're going to go into your acceptance, and the thing with a disease like this, it's long lasting, and I think it's appropriate to bring it up because here we are, and for people who have Duchenne's, their final stages happen, maybe in their 20s. Used to be in their teens or even younger, but now, as I said, life expectancy is growing because of the work that's been done just in the past couple of decades. But anyway, and with something like that, or it could be cancer, it could be a long-term cancer, you could come into acceptance and say, well, okay, I'm at peace with this now. But then something else happens, and you go back into denial. For example, let's use the Duchenne's example. The parents come to acceptance. They say, okay, this is how it's going to be. We're just going to make life as pleasant as we can while we have our child. And then, somebody has a birthday party that he doesn't get invited to, or you get a flyer in the mail about, baseball tryouts, and that your child, is wheelchair bound and won't be playing baseball. Not to say that they can't have fun, but then you go back into that, you're then in some cases thrown out of acceptance and put back into bargaining and maybe anger, if you will. So anyway, coming through any kind of psych course, especially a course on human development, you should definitely be well versed in Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's ideas and theories. Years ago, in probably 1980, I was 20 years old. When I first heard of hospice, I thought they were mispronouncing hospital. I was completely unaware. And it was an insurance person, a person who sold insurance, that I would happen to be talking to. And the way he explained hospice, I said, well, what is hospice? I don't know what it is. I had no idea. And he said, well, it's worse than a hospital. It's where people go who are too sick to be cared for, and they know they're going to die. People who are too sick for a hospital go to hospice. It sounded dreadful to me at the time. I have subsequently learned that hospice is one of the most wonderful institutions that we have in this country. Of course, as I've gotten older and experienced more professionally and personally of people in the later stages of life, or maybe who have had a terrible accident, having hospice as a resource, and I also, beyond having as I said, people in the later stages of life or people who've had an accident where hospice gives care. I work with a lot of children who have lost a loved one. It could be a parent, it could be a grandparent, it could be a sibling, it could be an aunt or an uncle. Hospice also does a lot of great work with kids as well as adults to help them after they've lost someone. Maybe the person died suddenly, and here we are. Like, what do I do now? Like, where's my support? Uh, anyway, hospice steps in. They have weekend retreats for kids where a bunch of kids who've lost a loved one get together and um, the kids commiserate. It's nice to know that they're not the only people that this has happened to. They do some drawings that they draw, like they do in memory of the person they lost. They set off like candles on a Chinese lantern kind of a thing with their wishes and memories for the person. Their people's faith is respected. If you're a Christian, that's respected. If you're not a Christian, that's respected. If you're a Muslim or a Hindu, or if you're the Jewish persuasion, that's also respected. So hospice is a wonderful chain of organizations. Hospice is not nationwide. Each hospice kind of runs on its own or area. They run their own. They're very well funded. Most places, like even if you don't have means, they can help you out tremendously. And not only, okay, so I gave the example of how they can come in after you perhaps lost a loved one, how they can come in and help support you. But when you have someone who's terminally ill and they are not going to get better, now the hospital can sometimes fight and fight and fight and try and make you better. But you sometimes you come to a point where, you know what, depending on several different factors. I mean, if you got cancer and you're 30 years old and you've otherwise been healthy, like you might want to fight a little bit more. But if you have cancer and it's pretty aggressive and you're 85 or 90, you might say, well, you know what, I mean, given my age, first of all, that's um, goes against me, and I have the cancer and different things and different other health issues that may come along at 85 years old. So you go there, and what they do is they make sure that you don't suffer. If you don't want to, they will make sure that they give you medicine. They'll medicate you so that you don't suffer, unless you say no. I'm not going to just go out as a zombie or whatever some people say. Like I'm going to manage the pain a little bit, but I want to be awake. I want to be alert. But they'll make sure that whatever your wishes are, that they'll follow that. And in many cases, by that point, the people that I've worked with say, listen, it's just not worth it to suffer. Like, I've made my peace. I've said my goodbyes to my family, or if you will, or made my, reconciled all our differences or whatever. So we'll still talk perhaps, but there's just no reason for me to suffer on the way out. I know at some point I'm going to die, so why suffer? So they're there to take care of that. Now there's hospice centers, and I'm sure some of you know this. I'll share another story about that. And then they can also come to your home, and they can sometimes be there 24/7, or they can be there for a few hours, depending on what you wish. But sometimes people do die, and so that's what they want. They want to die at home. And I'm sure many of you have stories and have heard stories or have firsthand stories. The older I get, obviously, the more I have from a personal standpoint as well as professional standpoint. I taught years ago when I was teaching at a different college on campus before we even had online education at most places, and certainly this campus where I was teaching. It was a general psych class, general psychology, and we cover everything in general psychology. Of course, in one of the chapters had within the chapter death and dying, and there was a little section on hospice. And I, even at that time, had learned quite a lot more about hospice, but I was teaching adult students who had returned to school to get their bachelor's degree. And one of the students in there, although I didn't know at the time, because we have I don't always lecture like this, we have interaction. So she shared, that she had a child that had died. None of us had known that, but she felt comfortable sharing that in the class live at that time in the on ground class face to face. And then she went on to talk about what a wonderful experience she had with hospice, and how terrible it was to lose a child. And I hope I never have to find that out. My heart breaks for people who lose a child. It's hard to lose any loved one, even parent or grandparent. To lose a child is would just would crush me, and I'm sure would crush most people. But she explained what they did and how they helped her and how they helped her family and how they helped um, everyone. Her child died suddenly, so it wasn't like it was a disease. So they stepped in. Then she went to volunteer. Like, they got to a point where she kind of felt like she was on her way to being healed, or she was recovering, and she thought it would be nice for her to volunteer at the hospice that had helped her, so she could help other people get through it. And she had volunteered there for about a year. And just as we were in this class, about halfway through, she was saying that she had applied for a paid position there, and they had hired her, so she was going to start working there, excuse me, in the next couple of weeks. So just hearing her story was, fantastic. Hold on one second. I'm at work, and the announcement came on. So, and again, I just kind of let her tell her experience with hospice. What could I add to that? She had the experience, so it's a fantastic organization, and nothing at all like I originally thought of it. So yeah, and I think this little blurb here that says emphasizes quality rather than the length of life, where I think that's a key. Hospitals will try and get you better or get you to live longer, and at some point you say, well, why am I going to live longer? I can't get out of this bed. I'm in and out of it, or I'm going to be in and out of it. No matter, even if you keep me around longer, I'm going to fade in and fade out of consciousness, and I won't be lucid. So yeah, so you say, look, I'm not looking for the length. I'm not looking to add months on. I'm looking to add quality to while the time I'm here. So rather than me writhing in pain, take away my pain so that I can have a conversation with those that I love. So it's it can be a very tough topic and a very tough subject to go over and teach. But again, being prepared for it can be beneficial, as we're all going to face it. I'm not going to go keep you much longer, and since no one else is on the call. But this section here and the slides are very good. How to support someone who's facing the end of life, being matter of fact and sharing information, not withholding anything. That's all very important. And sometimes people get a little confused by that. People are more resilient, and if you have children and you have a loved one who's very sick, it's tough to share. We try to protect kids, right? But we want to share it with them in the age appropriate way and developmentally appropriate way. And they're, again, more resilient than we give them credit for. And if we withhold information, it tends to have more detriment than benefit, and the detriment is long lasting because they feel resentment that you didn't share with them something that they felt they wanted to know, and then they would deal with it the way they wanted to deal with it. So euthanasia is a very, very controversial subject. We could spend an entire course on euthanasia. If there were people here to discuss their opinions, it could be very lively. I don't know that I have a definitive opinion on it. My opinion on it, for your humble professor, because I do have religious beliefs and I have moral and psychological things. Where I am with it, for what it's worth, is I pray for people. I try and listen to people and support them, but I stop short of asserting a political view or even a religious view if someone says, look, I can't take it anymore. Now, obviously, there are some people, suicide's different. There's some people who want to pull the string, way too early on their lives. In my opinion, but again, it's up to them, or they have their own opinion, I should say, not up to them per se. But there are some times when someone really is hurting, in terrible pain, and there is no hope. That it's really hard for me to say I'm against it. It's a very, very rare, very extreme circumstance for me to say that based on my religious beliefs as well as my professional beliefs. But I have read some case studies where I would have a hard time telling a person that I'm completely against it and you're completely wrong with this. And again, their life. So I'm gonna stop here. But I do want to just once again tell you what a joy it's been for me. I hope to see you all again in other classes as well. If you have anything out there, get it in me as soon as you can. I'll do my best to get it all graded. If it's a late assignment, obviously I'm going to grade the assignments that then turn in on time, because after midnight you can't turn anything in, and I have to have a pretty quick turnaround on grades. So I'll certainly will grade everything that's due this week, and if there's because most things got turned in last week, so that shouldn't be a problem either. If you're missing an assignment from last week, please get it in. But assignments from 2 and 3 weeks ago, I'll do my best. I will, but understand that I got to turn grades in by like Wednesday, a week from tomorrow, and I can't really even start grading until Monday. So anyway, having said that, it's been a pleasure. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns. As I've said many times, you can get me in the message tab is the best way, and I will get back to you. I check it several times a day, at least once a day for sure, and usually more than twice, usually several times. So do that. I'll be praying for you this week as well as praying for your families. And I think we're going to end it there. I'll give you the Bible verse so you can get your credit if you do watch this. We're going to go with, oh my goodness gracious. Oh, you know what? Not forget Bible verse. We're going to go with the Epistle of John, the 1 John, John's first letter. Okay, the Epistle of John, not the Gospel of John. 1 John. It's a letter that he wrote, and read it if you'd like to, or just tell me that it's 1 John. And we will go from there. That's it. I wish you all the best. Have a great rest of the week, and I will see you in the course room.